All right, my name is John Palzer. I am the coordinator of creative writing for the Department of Humanities. Before we get started in welcoming our guest, I'm going to have to do the requisite thank yous for this event. Student Life was kind enough to offer us the wherewithal and the means of putting on this show for you today. And so I'd like to make sure I thank them. A couple of other announcements that I want to mention. Actually, I should also thank a couple other people. I've got a crack team of creative writing faculty that work side by side with me in getting everything done. We prop each other up in the midst of our chaos, and so I have to always thank Meg Gilio for all of her assistance and help with everything. I have to help Nick Fargnoli for all of his assistance with everything. I don't know if I see Nick out there today.
He's on the right now to help with the event.
Gotcha. And my intern, Lydia Miller, who cannot be here today because, like so many young folks, she has a job, and so she had to go make money so she can survive. But without Lydia, we would not have been able to do some of the promotional stuff, like getting posters up, and so she very much assisted with that as well. So, well, here comes Nick now. So, this is being brought to you by not only Student Life, but the Creative Writing Program. If any of you out there are interested in the Creative Writing Program, it is a great opportunity for you to practice creating that great text that you can imagine yourself making your whole life, which whether it's a book of poetry, or a collection of short stories, or even working in the creative nonfiction personal memoir realm, taught by our very own Maureen Musser, who's out in the crowd. It's all the courses, the core courses in creative writing carry art electives, so you don't need to be in the program to enjoy what it is that we have to offer you. If you're looking for an art elective, please check us out if you are interested in exploring creative writing. And our students who explore, many of them have had no background whatsoever in the creative arts, and they just want to learn something new or try something out that they've always dreamed that they might want to see come to fruition. And so please come and see me, and we can set you up for that great opportunity to write the great American whatever, fill-in-the-blank novel, collection of poetry, what have you. I also want to announce that a week from this Friday, October 27th, we're putting on our Fall Lights event, as it's called, which is this guy as part of that. That's Nick Fargnoli I mentioned earlier. Good timing, Nick. I'm just about to mention Fall Lights next Friday, October 27th, at Art Space 36 in downtown Canandaigua, which is an evening of poetry and improvisational music backing us as we read our poems. Nick, it starts at 6 o'clock?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
We moved the time, yeah,
Okay.
because of Julia.
Okay.
We're sitting on Julia.
Excellent, thank you. I'm glad, otherwise people would be lingering outside the door an hour earlier.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, thank you.
Yep.
And so, without much further ado, Francesca Padilla is our guest today, and she's a graduate of our very own SUNY system, earning her BA in creative writing from the State University of New York at Purchase, where we have one of our creative writing students who wants to apply to the film program, actually. There.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and he's not here today, but he graduated and he's probably working.
Yeah, we'd probably have a lot to talk about.
Yes, could I put him in touch with you?
Sure.
Excellent, thank you. Francesca is a recipient of a Walter Dean Myers grant from We Need Diverse Books, and we need them, and was most recently accepted into artist residencies with the studios of Key West and Sundress Academy for the Arts. She's based out of Rochester. Ms. Padilla works in community engagement with health and human services, and the reason we've gathered to listen today, she's the author of this young adult novel, What's Coming to Me, which critics have defined, as I gleaned off the internet, as an equally poignant and thrilling contemporary YA novel about grief, anger, and fighting for what you deserve. And Francesca will let us know if that's exactly the way you would have liked them to explain it or describe it. So without further waste of time, please welcome Francesca Padilla.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I agree with that assessment. I think that was 585 magazine. So, local. Okay. So, hi, everybody. My name is Francesca, or Fran. A lot of people call me Padilla. So, I have a lot of different roles and identities. Been through a lot, and I would love to talk about everything that I've done and all my accomplishments and whatnot. But I kind of thought that instead of just me telling you my biography, which you might forget, as soon as you leave, that I would start with a story, just a story, as if we are at a party and or gathering, if you remember those from COVID, from before COVID. Couple sentence background. So I'm here as a fiction writer. I also work in the nonprofit field, and I have for upwards of 15 years. My debut novel came out last year on hardcover, and came out again this year on paperback. It's also an audio and whatnot. We can talk about that a little bit later, and I'm hoping that you all have questions, because I really love to answer questions and I really love to talk. And so that's kind of why today is going to be mostly talking, just me chatting with you. So is that okay with you all? Are you cool with just hearing a little story first? Okay, awesome. Okay, so my story starts when I'm a teenager. Well, it starts a little bit earlier, but I'm going to start this particular story as when I'm a teenager. So when I was a teenager, I was desperate to leave my hometown. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in it's a nice neighborhood. It wasn't like the hood, and it wasn't a rich neighborhood. It was a lot of immigrants, but I was completely sick of it. I was truly, I think like any teenager, I was just like, I have to get out of here. Sorry, I just dropped my pen. I thought it was kind of like the worst, ugliest place ever. I was tired, excuse me. I was tired of the buildings, I was tired of the trains and the buses and the subways and the traffic and just graffiti, everything. I was just tired of it. And so to me, I had to get out. And the country, like what I thought of as the country is really what I found out was like the suburbs. Like it was like, I had only been outside of Brooklyn maybe a handful of times. I'm not going to include going to the Dominican Republic where my family's originally from, because that's like another planet for me compared to New York City. It's a different country. But specifically, I was like, I want to go where there's like trees and grass and houses, and like that's just different to me. So basically what I saw on TV. But it wasn't really about leaving Brooklyn, as I kind of realized over the years. It was really about leaving my family. So I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with my mother and my brother and sometimes other family, because my mom's the kind of person who would let people stay over. Excuse me. And like I said, it was a nice neighborhood, but like the apartment was tiny, there were roaches, there were mice. It was laid out in a weird way that I didn't have any privacy like ever. And like I said, there was a lot of the time other people staying with us, like other family members, because my mom was wonderful and like let everybody stay. And so my mother made maybe like, I don't know, like $9,000 a year, which I find out now is what the government classifies as extreme poverty. And I know how much she made because I applied to college by myself. And you know, when it was time to do like the financial aid, I took out a lot of loans, and that's how I knew how much my mother's income was. And so by the time I was like, a senior in high school, I was fairly sure. Like I was like, oh, we're poor. Like that's fine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna be poor. Let me just get out of here. So I didn't like being at home, and I was really kind of done. And I realized a little bit late in the game of high school that the only way to do that was to go to college, was to go away to college. I had really messed up for a lot of high school because my mother was in the hospital, my father was incarcerated, she was in and out of the hospital, and nobody was like really watching me. And so I've been writing all my life, and so I was writing novels in high school. And I also had like internships that I was doing to just like be out of the house. But I was failing my classes because I wasn't going. And so around junior to senior year, I was like, oh, if I don't get my act together, I am going to be stuck here. I thought about joining the Navy for a little while, which did not happen. I don't know if they would have even accepted me if I applied to the Navy. And so I found out about a creative writing program at Purchase. I'm getting to the story, the crux of the story. But I found out about the creative writing program at Purchase. Found out that my grades didn't have to be that good because a big part of the application was the portfolio. I was like, oh well, I've been writing for years, and I sent them like 50 pages because they didn't have like a number of pages that they wanted. So I get into college I still feel to this day the skin of my teeth because my grades were so bad. Like I had failed gym like 3 times. I took like 4 gym classes senior year to make up for it. So by the skin of my teeth, I get into college. I go away to SUNY Purchase, which is in Westchester. It's not actually that far from New York City, but to me it felt like a million light years away. And so I go, I have a great time, I have a great experience. Purchase is full of hippies, I'm a hippie, it's great. And then the end of the school year comes, and all of my friends go back to like their little suburban homes. Again, I was I didn't talk about like my home life at college. One thing I should mention is that my mother had a serious illness. She had a few. She was born with a heart disease, with a rare heart disease called tetralogy of Fallot. And so it's not something that runs in the family. And but she also, like when I was around 11 or 12, she was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease, so she had to do dialysis in the house. And if you know anybody who's ever had to do that, a lot of the time it's somebody who's very, very old, but my mother was in her 40s. And so it was kind of a big deal. Like it's a serious thing. So she had to do dialysis in the house. There were boxes of dialysis equipment everywhere. That was just something else taking up space. And it was just hard to be around. At the time I was like, oh no, I gotta get out of Brooklyn. But it was like, I don't wanna be near that. So all my friends go back to their like little suburban places. They're all, I was keenly aware like, oh, I'm going back to this like horrible life. So I go back home for the summer. The only job that I can get is scooping ice cream. Here's where it starts to tie into the book that I wrote. Not a ton, but a little bit. So you can see like the influences, right? So I get a job scooping ice cream at a local chain. I'm not gonna say what the chain is because if you read even a little bit of my book, you'll see that it's like influenced by that, and it doesn't show them in the best light. So local chain in New York City. And so I get paid under the table. It's a little bit shady. And I'm saving up my money. I get paid in cash. I get tips. I spend my money a little bit here and there on underage drinking and other things. And I bought a hat once. But I didn't really spend the money. I just like saved it and saved it and saved it and saved it. And by August, I had made $1,200, which is like the most money I had ever seen in my entire life. Uh-oh. I'm sorry, I was so into my story. So I had $1,200 by the end of the summer. And then I save it. Like I don't put it in a bank. I'm sorry, I don't put it in the bank. I put it in a little pouch, and I put it in my dresser drawer. I don't know why I did that. I think that at the time I was like, I don't trust banks. But I think I knew that I was gonna, well, here's the thing. I had a very specific goal with this money. And my goal was I cannot live at home next summer. I cannot live at home next summer. It's $1,200, it's the most money I've ever seen. I had it in my head that I would like find a different city and just be there for the summer. And so I think like New Orleans is a place, like I would go on like Craigslist and like look at like how much does it cost to live in New Orleans? How much does it cost to live in Philadelphia? It's like, oh, $600 a month? Like whatever. So I like have it in my head, I'm just gonna find a studio apartment somewhere and I'm not gonna go home next summer. So I think it's like I knew I was gonna spend it, so like why put it in the bank? I think that's what my logic was. So I hide it in the dresser. I go away to college. I remember the money, but I don't really think about it. It's just kind of there. I go back home to visit a few times in the year. I check on the money, leave it, whatever. So at the end of freshman year, at the end of sophomore year, I have a boyfriend, and I'm still, like, I'm not going back to Brooklyn. He's from Rochester, so we decide to get a sublet in the city of Rochester. I look around and I find a great sublet, it's super cheap. It's like $450 or something. And it's a U of R student who's leaving for the summer. So I arrange to do this. I guess we're the only people who, like, I didn't have to even apply or anything. I was just like, I have money for the summer. Let me just rent this. And she's like, great, cool. So I go back to Brooklyn, and this is where this becomes a cautionary tale. So I'm hanging out. I'm all jittery and whatnot. And I can't get to sleep one night after I come home. And so I decide to steal one of my mother's sleeping pills. And so, thank you. So I decide to steal one of her sleeping pills, and and it's Ambien. Who here has ever heard of Ambien? Who here has heard the horror stories of people taking Ambien and driving naked into the streets? Yeah. So I take this Ambien, I don't go to sleep, I stay awake, and I take my money out of its hiding place to count it for fun. Like, because it's the most money I've ever seen. And so I take the money out, and I count it, and I was like, in my Ambien stupor, I'm like, I'm gonna change the hiding spot. I put it somewhere else. And then I go to sleep, and then the next morning, I can't find it. I can't find this money anywhere. I go through all of the dressers, I go through all of the closets, I go through I turn the entire apartment upside down. My family is like worried about me because I'm freaking out. Again, most money I've ever seen. And so I can't find it. I do not find the money. My mother offers to, she has like a little statue, like an antique statue that she got from when she did, so my mother is a wonderful person. And she was like the matriarch of like our whole extended family. Like people would come to her for, like everybody says that their mother is awesome, but like I had the proof because other people were like, your mother is a magical person. So she has this little statue that she got from volunteering. She was like, she would go visit this elderly woman named Miss Falchi a few blocks away. And everybody loved my mother. Like everybody just like fell in love with my mother. And like strangers would like tell her their life story. And so she gave her this gift of this antique thing. And she was like, here, I think this thing that Miss Falchi gave me might be worth some money. Like, why don't you go see if you can get something for it? And like to make a dent in this $1,200 that I lost. So I'm like, okay, I guess. And so I get on the train and I go to like this antique area in Manhattan. I honestly, I'm not sure how I found it or how I knew of it, but I end up at this like antique place. I can only get like $100 for it. And so I take the $100, I bring it back, I'm like, this is what I could get for it. And the guy also was like, hey, he was also like flirting with me and offering me a job. So like on top of losing money, I got like, it was a lot. So I don't find the money, and now I'm like, what am I gonna do? I can't leave if I don't have this, if I can't afford to leave, like I can't leave if I don't have this money. What's gonna happen with the sublet that I found, whatever. So my mother makes it work. She's like, don't worry, listen, like, I got you, like, you're gonna be fine. Like, you're gonna, and I think that, like, it's so important for somebody to, like, the fact that she had nothing, you know, and she was like, I'm gonna make it work for you. We're gonna do this, we're gonna make it work. And so she made a bunch of calls, she gave me some of her SSI money, she borrowed money here and there, and she gave me like $800 that I used for the summer. She really didn't have that money, and so she gave me the money. She gave me what she could, based on like just kind of cobbling together this amount of money. And so I go to Rochester, I have a great time. I'm broke all summer, but I have a great time, because I'm 21, and it's great, like, you know, it's 20. And And it's fine. And then I just kind of forget about it. All the while, like in the back of my head, it's like, what happened to that money? Like, where'd it go? It's just, did somebody steal it? And we had so many theories. And so eventually I forget about the money. Fast forward to Thanksgiving of my senior year of college. We are meeting at my aunt's house, and for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is kind of a big deal in my family. My aunt, who's my mother's sister, she's a chef. She always makes something amazing. And so we're all gonna descend on the Bronx for this Thanksgiving feast. I'm running late, of course. I'm in my dorm, I'm the only person there. And my mother calls me, and I'm like thinking she's like rushing me to get to the Bronx because I'm late, because I'm always late. I'm like drying my hair and whatever, and just like playing music and whatever. And I answer the phone and I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. She's like, Francesca, I have to tell you something. And I'm like, yeah, like, is everything okay? What's going on? And she's like, I found it. I found the money. And I was like, where did you find the money? Where? And she goes, oh, I found it in this board game. It was like categories or something. And I was like, and so at that, and I was like, it's Thanksgiving, you all. Like it's Thanksgiving Day. So we were both like, we're crying, we're on the phone, we're like crying, like tears of relief. And at that point, I figured out that, so first of all, I had 3 jobs. I had like 2 on-campus jobs, and I did catering. So I have like a little bit of money, like it's not anything near what I would have now, but you know, for me it's like, okay, I'm doing all right. And then I also figured out that I can borrow a little bit more from my loans, and I was gonna use that for when I graduate, that I don't have to live at home. Like, so I was like, I already had a plan. So I was like, you know what, like I actually don't really need this. I mean, I did, but I was like, you can have the money. Like, you can just have it. And she starts crying, and she's like, you don't understand. I prayed for this. Like, I prayed. I was like, I did not know what I was, not for the money, to find the money, but she was like, I was really struggling, and I just found this, and I really needed it. And like, she had no, like, she had no further words. She was just like crying and thankful. And so that's my story. That's my story. Now, does anyone have any idea why I decided to tell this story? Yes.
I think you wanted to tell us that it may seem difficult at times to get through difficult situations, but you'll eventually get through it.
Yeah, well, that's one takeaway for sure. It's something that I think about this story a whole lot. And I think about the fact that it took place, that it ends on Thanksgiving, and you know, a holiday that means a lot to my family, especially me, because I love pecan pie. But any other thoughts? Yes?
It was like an exchange of good karma for your mother, and like the universe kind of used you as the way to bless her back for what she did for you.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Any other thoughts? Well, let me ask you this. How much money did my mother make a year? $9,000, that's right. What, is it grade when you're in college? What holiday was it? Thanksgiving. I could really keep going. So I want to sit here and quiz you, but I feel like I know that you're gonna get all the answers right. And why is that? Because I stood here and I told you a story about what is ultimately my life, instead of standing up here and saying, my name is Francesca, I'm Dominican, I'm from Brooklyn, I grew up really poor, you should believe me. Like, I told you that as a story. And so, to me, story is everything. It's how we communicate. It's whether you're telling a fictional story, a real story, or you're trying to convey a lesson. Like, it is in literally everything that we do. So does anybody here write? That's awesome. So I'm depending on all of you to have wonderful questions for me after this. But, not everybody said that they're a writer, but everybody here is a storyteller because it's in literally everything that we do. Story is how we convey important information, whether it's survival related, literally, or if it's something that's important to us that we carry with us. And it helps us make sense of the world around us. So like at the time, when I was right after I lost the money, the story I was telling myself was, this is horrible. Like, this is literally the worst thing that's ever happened. Well, it might not have been the worst, but it felt like the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I was like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Like, I remember asking myself, like, why me? Like, why, and little tiny voice was like, because you took Ambien and you shouldn't have taken Ambien. That's why it happened. But completing the story years later, it's a wonderful story, and and I can see the meaning behind it very clearly, as you said. So so story changes. Like, it changes based on who's telling it, who's hearing it, and what they're getting from it, and time. Like, what happens to it over time. Like, the story that you tell yourself today is not the same story that you're going to tell yourself about this moment years from now. So, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I just wanted to tell you the story and tell it instead of giving you my bio that you're just going to forget. So, all right. So I think that I wanted to also read from the book, if that's cool with you. Are you all cool with that? So there was a book here. Oops. I wasn't trying to. Oh my gosh, we're past the halfway point. So there was, yes, I would like to borrow that, because I was going to use that. I have one in my bag, but I don't feel like walking over there. Thank you.
Oh, that's yours.
Thank you. So now, I wanted to, I did something a little bit different with telling that story, just because it's, when you're doing events like this as an author, what you're really doing is bringing yourself. You're talking about yourself, and you're talking about your life experience, and all of what I just said seriously informs who I am today and the work that I do as a writer, as somebody who works in human services. Like, that tells you so much about where I come from and why I do what I do. So without further ado, I'm going to read a little bit from the book, and then we can have a bit of a Q&A. Actually, I'm going to start by reading the author's note, which is at the end. Dear reader, when my mother was very young, she underwent open heart surgery for a rare defect she'd had since birth. It was the 1970s in the Dominican Republic. Living still wasn't guaranteed, and childbirth was basically prohibited for her due to the possibility she might not survive. It's true. She fixed her heart temporarily, and then she fell in love, and finally she took her chances and had me, and later on, my little brother. Her pregnancy terrified people. When I first had the idea for what's coming to me, I was only a couple of years older than Minerva, its protagonist. I had grown up, was still growing up, with a chronically ill parent and seeking books about kids with chronically ill parents. I was also very poor, very brown, very angry. I didn't know it at the time, but what I was looking for was a book on anticipatory grief. It's a subset of grief, the type we feel in advance of the actual ending, when we can see it coming, even if it's far away. Since my mother was seriously ill for most of my childhood, grief was just around the corner, Grief was around just as long. It was also just around the corner. Not so much a friend, but a companion, sometimes a co-conspirator, and other times an opponent, one more worthy than anything made of flesh. People familiar with grief are likely to also be familiar with this complicated dynamic, its infinite faces, how we perceive it, interact with it, and are influenced by it. We know that every instance of grief is unique because every life and relationship is unique. I craved a reading and later writing experience that would give voice to this. I concluded that I'd write about all this someday and then set it aside. When I returned to it years later, my mother had passed away. The idea solidified. And so this book is about every kind of grief, about how once it happens, it's always happening. I didn't mean to write about anger or being young and poor and brown in the suburbs either, but this book became about all of those things too. The final piece for me was its escapism, and ultimately its joy. This book is a whole voyage, and I'm really glad you're here for it. Francesca Padilla. That's how you say it with spice. Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, okay. Oh, chapter 5. No, chapter 4. Sorry, I waffled back and forth about which one I wanted to do. Sorry, I'm getting like wrapped up in my own book. Okay. Yes, this is the one. Okay, so this is a scene in school. So this book takes place over this. Let me actually just back up and tell you a little bit about the book. So it is a young adult novel. I would call it older young adult. It's not like a lot of, if people who aren't familiar with young adult, they're like, oh, is that like Twilight? I'm like, no, it's not. It's like, is it like Harry Potter? No. Is it like the Hunger Games? No. So it's a young adult novel from Soho Teen, which is an imprint of Soho Press, which is a very illustrious and well-known publisher that partners with Penguin Random House on distribution. So if you look it up, you'll see Penguin Random House kind of associated with it. And I think the official age group is 14 and up, but it has some mature themes. So it's about a girl who lives in a fictional town in Long Island called Nautilus, which is sort of a character in its own right because it's this like gritty seaside, like not like haves and have-nots kind of a town, and it's a beach area, and I love the beach. So she's isolated and she's kind of on her own. Her mom's been in and out of the hospital. And so all she has kind of going for her, and she's also been kicked out of school. So all she has going for her is this job at the ice cream stand, and she's saving up to leave Nautilus. She can't wait to leave. So there's a robbery in the very, very beginning of the book. This sets off a series of events, sort of uncovers that her boss might be hiding money illegally in the ice cream stand. So she teams up with a friend / drug dealer / neighbor to find the money so they can solve all their problems and live happily ever after. And of course, antics ensue, and it's not as simple as that. So that's what the book is about. And so it takes place over the summer. So I'm going to read part of a chapter. I think it's the only chapter that takes place in school. Actually, one of 2 chapters. And so, yeah, I think that's all I need to say. Takes place in the guidance counselor's office. Okay. Out of habit, I head straight for the main office where information is exchanged about the guilt that's unavoidable with teachers and counselors. The hallways are quiet, the air thin and moist and oddly cool despite the lack of air conditioning. Now that I'm here, this feels doable. Maybe I can, in fact, start all over again. I tell the woman at the front desk my name and that I was supposed to start 2 weeks ago. Technically, a week and a half, I add, as if it makes one iota of a difference. Hang on a second, she says. She eyes me up and down. Are you second starts? I resent the assumption. Oh, second starts is like a special program for kids who got kicked out. I resent the assumption, but also her assumption is right, and I hate her a little bit for that as well. I look down at my outfit, cut-off shorts, actual jeans I cut above the knees that are now fraying admirably, and a thin cotton t-shirt with a watercolor of a mongoose on the front, my most prized dollar bin clothing item. She sets down the phone she was holding. They'll have more information for you in the guidance office. My second starts counselor is a woman with a fake tan, helmet hair, and a comically raspy voice that rattles the outdated papers on the bulletin board above her desk. She insists on being called Mrs. Delgado. Please always say Mrs., never say Miss. Or Ms. She emphasizes this as Ms. while skimming my file on her computer screen, probably for the first time ever. Somewhere inside, among the data and pixels, is an alternate reality Minerva Gutierrez, a version they think they know, whose actions are of a lot more importance than those of the one sitting in this chair. Minerva Gutierrez, formerly gifted, currently poor, and a total degenerate. Before everything changed, my favorite subjects were chemistry. I liked the balance of it. My debate elective, and sometimes language arts. Before everything changed, I was going to take AP classes. If I couldn't get into college in New York City, I'd go to school as far away as reasonably possible. The plan was supposed to be Greater Nautilus High School, then college, then a job. I didn't realize how fragile the plan was all along, how comforting it was to have until I got in trouble. Then a piece was taken away and the entire plan collapsed. Minerva, Mrs. Delgado intones. What happened to your attendance? I haven't been feeling well. This feels true enough. I couldn't sleep, and then I found a sleeping pill in Mom's room, and it hit me like a hand forcing my head underwater. I remember that numb, wavy feeling just before the blissful loss of consciousness and yearn for it now. Well, I must say you look exhausted, she quips. I bite down on a response. It feels like a trick invitation. You've missed quite a lot of days this summer term. All of them, as a matter of fact. She moves on, clicking through more information. She squints at the page as if to make sure of the number, then widens her eyes, impressed. Absent 62 days in the past school year. She peers over at me expectantly. Yep. She clicks again. I remember you now. Assault and attempted robbery of a fellow student. You could have been charged for real, you know. I know. That's not really what happened, but I've learned with most adults it never helps to try and set things straight, especially when it comes to one's own good name. I see you didn't attend the tutoring sessions during your expulsion period, she says. Why? She means the tutoring sessions forced on me by the school district, intended to keep me caught up. These were scheduled at the Nautilus Point Library, 2 trailers back to back on a lot behind an older building that used to be a real library until the hurricane before last. The one time I went, the college student volunteer didn't know what a homonym was, which caused me to question the validity of the entire system. Mom would have come to the same conclusion. Mrs. Delgado moves on while I'm still trying to figure out how to answer. She locks her hands over the desk. I know you've been through a lot, Minerva. I hope very much for your sake we can find a place for you. She waits for me to respond, but all I can think is that Second Starts is supposed to be the place for me. Mom saw to it when she last met with the school. That plus Mrs. Delgado is one of those people who uses names like punctuation marks. Yeah, me too, I mumble. She half nods, as if that'll suffice. We only want the best for all our students from Nautilus Point. Give them the support they need to become productive members of society. I could scream at the words, the lipstick smile, the fake reassuring tone. Why can't she just talk to me like a person instead of a brochure? Some people, she continues, might be better suited for alternative programming. At this, my temples sting, which used to signal tears coming. What's that mean, alternative programming? Well, the local Opportunity Center has a wonderful high school equivalency program, for instance. A cold wave knocks me over. Are you saying I have to drop out? There are only so many resources we can provide in Second Starts. Some people, Mrs. Delgado repeats, her voice thinning, just aren't a good fit. The words are thick in my throat. But I'm here. I'm here now. She looks directly into my eyes. I'm afraid it's too late. All I can think about is Nicole, insisting that I haven't been trying. I clench my hands, containing the heat of what feels like all my 17 years. Deep breaths, count to 10, 15, 20. None of it makes a difference. Does this make sense? Mrs. Delgado asks. What I'm saying to you? No. I shake my head. The cold wave has turned me upside down. I mean, yeah. Wonderful. I'll be sending some paperwork in the mail for your parents, whoever, to review. You take care. That's the end of that chapter. No, I'm just kidding. So, I think we have time for some questions if anyone has any, or I can do a little dance for you, as I promised. No. Does anyone have any writing questions? Yes.
Do you have any specific authors who inspire you, or or anything else that inspires you?
That's a good question. So the question for those on the webcast was, no, of course, it's fine. Who inspires me, which authors inspire me, or anything else that inspires me. So I want to say my favorite author is Jesmyn Ward. She wrote Salvage the Bones, which I read like every other year at this point. I would read her grocery lists, honestly. She's great. Salvage the Bones. So Janet Fitch, White Oleander is another important book for me because it was about a girl whose parent was a poet, really an artist. Like she was an artist. She was like big, larger than life. And my father, who went to prison, and my father was also an artist with a big personality who went to prison and was like, I'm not sure I've seen a book since then that captures that. So that book is really important to me. It has inspired me tremendously. Yeah, that's kind of a hard question. So as far as, I love Heather O'Neill, the Canadian writer who wrote Lullabies for Little Criminals and a bunch of other books. And I love Toni Morrison as well. I think Beloved is maybe the best book of all time. And so those are authors who inspire me. And in terms of like larger things, the themes in my work are really like anger, especially anger in girls, because it's just not I just feel like we should talk about that more. It's like boys can be angry and girls can be sad, and those are the things that are allowed. Like I like to explore anger in girls specifically, and injustice, and like was said earlier, fighting for what you deserve. I'm really influenced by, obviously, my lived experience as somebody like super low income and like just living in this, just chaotic environment, and also like from what I've learned in human services. So I've worked for 211 Lifeline, which is it's information and referral, but it's also mental health. So like the local suicide hotline, they do 988 as well. So mental health is something that is very important. I'm diagnosed as borderline personality disorder, so I talk about that a lot in my work. Not so much this piece, but in my work, and then on social media, I talk about it a lot. I just feel like we should talk about that more. And I was watching something recently that was like, I think I was watching like a Brene Brown, if you know Brene Brown, and she was like, she talks about vulnerability a lot, and she was like, vulnerability is not telling everybody you're bikini wax. It's, I actually turned off the video until she after that, but I was guessing that what she was gonna say was like, vulnerability is like, what do people get out of what you're saying? Like, you can't just like say whatever. It's like, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to other people? So, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier too. So that's to answer a little bit. There's so much more that I could say, but any other questions?
The two people
Oh.
might have questions. There's like Lydia and I think Rosie.
Okay.
They should just be able to unmute and speak.
I'm so pleased that you all are here, I have to say. In person and on the webcast. Like it's really humbling. I just have to say. So how do I access?
They should be able to speak. Would they just write it in chat?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if we can see the chat.
You see the chat.
As you walked in online, this is the
Um,
chat.
So the people who are in chat, if they're
Oh
willing
my
to
gosh.
speak.
You know what?
You lost them?
No, they're still there.
They're still there.
I don't see anything.
Well, the question that I saw that was on the board was
Sure.
about your writing process,
Okay.
which is interesting because that was actually a question that I was going to pose too. So I'm going to piggyback on their question if that's okay.
Okay. So the.
Oh, sorry, I was just given the microphone, which terrifies me, and now I'm starting to shake. But
Oh no.
can you talk a little bit about your writing process? I know that was a question that came up on the board. It was also my question as well.
My writing process is not something anyone should follow at all. So I have 2 kids, 2 dogs, 2 jobs, and a cat. And I'm separated. So I just write when I can. And I'm also a very slow writer. But what I will say is that, okay, something that I tell people a lot that's really, first of all, reading. I've noticed that when I stop reading, my writing dries up. It's a well that has dried up. So in order to have something to write, to fill the stores, I gotta read. So that's huge. That's part of, I would say that's part of my writing process. I also have to enjoy and be genuinely interested in what it is that I'm working on. If I lose that interest, and this is, I tell people, I actually have a whole set, like, I have like a presentation that I do about how, like, traditional publishing is sort of like a boot camp, like, this is how you get traditionally published, like, this is what it takes. And I spend a lot of time talking about, you gotta be interested in your own work, because you're gonna have to read it a million times when you're revising it, and then somebody else is gonna have to read it a million times, and then they're gonna send it back to you to revise, and then you're gonna have to read it a million more times. So you gotta love that shit. Like, you gotta love what you are writing. And if people can, and if you are, if you're writing something and you're not interested, your heart's not in it, not only is it gonna be hard for you, but the reader is gonna know, and they're not gonna care. It's like, if you don't care, why should somebody else care? So I make sure, part of my writing process is making sure that I am interested. And if it's something that, you know, like, we all sort of lose interest at one point in what we're doing, if it's a larger project, or we sort of, so one thing that I do is if I'm kind of stuck and I'm like having trouble connecting emotionally to the work, I sit down and I make a list of things. Maybe it's a scene, like why am I writing this in the first place? What is interesting about this whole story to me? And I write it down. And I also, I guess if I'm stuck on things like plot, then I'll just kind of write down exactly what happens in that scene, the kind of like an outline, and then sometimes that'll become the chapter itself. I'm gonna give you one more tip. And that one more tip is, I use this program called Write or Die. So it is an online program. You can get like a desktop version, or you can use or there's like a website version where you can just like go to the website and it's like a little word processor. And it forces you to write. There's like different modes. And there's this one mode that if you stop writing for a few seconds, you can sort of toggle it. It could be like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. You can change the settings. If you stop writing, it'll make like a really unpleasant noise, like a garbage noise, like a screeching, like in a horror movie. And then there's another mode that it'll start deleting what you have written. Yeah, people always gasp at that, which I love. But yeah, so a good number of chapters have been written using that. And so those are just like, my advice or my process is really just like forcing myself to sit down and write, and not get caught up in like, oh, what if I don't like it? I'm scared. Like, I just kind of have to force myself because of my schedule and because of my requirement that I have to be wholeheartedly invested and interested in my own stuff. Yeah. Yes.
How do you best like in my creative writing class, we're talking about giving characters motivation. How do you best go about giving your characters, like your different characters motivation for like what they do and everything like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've been asked that at least not in a long time. So, you know that advice of like, every character has to want something. It's true. Like, you have to like sit down and really think about what your characters want and how it serves the story. I like to think about challenges a lot because a story without challenges is very boring. It's kind of why stories exist. It's to kind of, like I said, help us make sense of the world. Sometimes it's something that's urgent, like, you know, in not prehistoric, oh my gosh, in like caveman times, they tell stories to be like, oh, don't go over there because there's a bobcat, you know, like that's, you know, that's a story. So I like to think about challenges, like I'll sit down and be like, how can I make this worse? How can I make that worse? And then it then becomes your character's job to, like they have to apply, like, or you as the writer have to apply what you know about the character to get them out of that. Like you know, that expression is like, I don't know, there's an expression that's basically like, you don't know what someone's character is until they're faced with a problem. Like, it's kind of like that. So I would say getting to know your characters, be okay with the fact that not everything that you write of them in their point of view, whether it's third person, first person, whatever, is not gonna make it. But it all helps you understand the character like they're a real person. So a lot of the time people just kind of assume that my main character is me, and that's not true. She has to be a separate person from me for me to be able to, like, writing does not really, at least I have not met a writer who's like, I'm gonna write a fictional story about my life, and it has to be exactly like my life. Like, that's hard. In order to, like, it has to be external to me. Like, she has to be a separate person, like, almost like I'm an actor who's like trying it on, or like a puppet master is. So a lot of people ask me, it's like, oh, Minerva's you, right? It's like, no, she's a different person. And so getting to know my characters like inside and out, whether you're just kind of writing, like free writing in their voice, whether you're doing different exercises, to like writing exercises to pull something out, that's important. Like, just get to know your characters and how they would respond in a situation. And if you ask yourself a question about your character and you can't answer it, it means you gotta sit down and get to know your character more. But yeah. Other questions? Yes, follow-up question.
How do you best go about writing dialogue? Like, I know, like, you know how people talk and they tend to speak differently. How do you best, like, show that between characters?
It helps to know the characters really well. So I was in a reading once with Joyce Carol Oates at the Brooklyn Book Festival. I saw Joyce Carol Oates in a panel, and she was like, get to know your, I remember someone asking a question similar to this, and she was like, get to know your characters. Put them in a room, get to know your characters, put them in a room together, they'll have something to say. So it comes back to like knowing them as people. Like, I'll just kind of have character dialogue like running through my head because I love my characters so much, So I really think that's the key, is like knowing them. And if you're like, I don't know, like, just keep writing. Even if it's gibberish. And the other thing I would say is don't worry about speech tags very much. Actually, there's like, we could be here for all day talking about dialogue, to be honest. But that's my short answer, because we're out of time. But is there time for any more questions? I know there were other questions.
There's one from the chat.
Sure.
What did it feel like to get in touch with your 17-year-old self when you captured the angst and tension in Minerva?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So, mini story, I promise. I did a visit at a high school in Brooklyn last year, and somebody asked me, "What did you learn about yourself while writing this?" And my answer was, "I learned that I had trauma." And they were like, "Whoa." Didn't ask probably. No, but I did. Like the way that people were writing about the book was like, this character is traumatized, and I was like, wait, if this character is traumatized and she's been through some of the same things that I have, that means I have trauma. So that's what it's like. No, it helped me. It helped me make sense of some of the things that I'd been through. And in the author's note, I wrote about my mom, and she passed away in the process of me writing this, and I feel like that really changed the whole fabric of the story. It gave me a completely different perspective on what I had been through. You know, it made me see grief as it added a circular quality to my grief. Like, and so that's what I learned, and I'm grateful for it. Do we have time for any more?
I don't know that we do.
Okay.
But if there is one last question, let's get that in, because I don't want to walk out feeling like
Well,
I'm
I'm happy to answer any questions outside, or you can follow me on social media.
And I was also
Just
asked to announce that there is a guitar player and snacks and coffee down in Hemlock Hall in room 1460 if people want to go down there and have a casual chat. If you're available, I'm not certain what your timeline is like, Francesca.
I have a little bit more time, but yeah, I gotta drop off some basketball tickets for an organization.
Yeah.
Long story. I won't tell it to you.
Well, one of the things, and I guess we'll maybe wrap it up. I was really fascinated by the fact that all these questions about trying to organize your writing and how to find some trajectory for your writing kept reflecting back to the fact that the money that you found in the story that you opened up with was found inside of a Scattergories game. And Scattergories is fascinating to me because its title is Scatter, but it's all about organization, right? You're trying to find everything organized under a single letter. And so the reward comes from moving through what's scattered and then finding the organization in some way. And that was my half-assed ability to bring us back to the beginning of this presentation. So.
Well, thank you for that attempt. And yeah, it's just story. There's layers. There's always. That's why I love that story, is because I always learn something from it. I always learn something new from it every time I even think about it. So, yeah, so interesting to talk about story.
Francesca, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.